we have Professor Mahajan on mitochondria. We also have student presentations, lightning presentations that should be interesting. And then finally cap it off with a competition of companies where you get to decide who's the best company to be presented to venture firms. And then we'll end at 5 o'clock sharp. So let me give a sort of brief overview of what aging is and what are the challenges to live longer. So who actually wants to live longer than 100? Great. Is it self-selection? It's sort of in this room. Autumn doesn't, by the sounds of it. So it's a challenging problem. So what is aging? I'll talk about me first. Anastasia talks about me a little bit, but no, I'm an entrepreneur. I've done lots of things, but transitioned the last 10 years to the intersection of biology and computation. And big experience in AI. AI is like top of mind right now. People are now talking about computers that become brains. I was talking about this literally 30 years ago. That's 1993. And so my prediction is in another 30 years, we'll still be talking about it. So if anyone wants to talk about AI, we can talk about that later on. That's not the thrust of this conference. I got re-educated. How did I get younger myself? There's a program at Stanford called DCI, Distinguished Careers Institute. I came back on this program about 8 years ago, and this program lets you come to Stanford after a 30-year career and take classes with the 20-year-olds. And I think I just felt younger by doing that, right? It's sort of like you're surrounded by young people, and I took Professor Snyder's class, and I took all the med school classes, and I took all the biology classes. And fortunately, you don't have to do the exams. But a lot of the professors, they make you do the homework. And so it's Professor Friedlander's over there laughing. She made me do the homework. And it's actually, thinking young. By thinking young, you can actually be young. We'll have to ask the brain aging people there. I think there is a school of thought that it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. And those of you who, I look like today, this morning, I've been in a fight, but actually I ran a marathon on Saturday, right? And qualified for Boston, but I fell over at mile 6 and then continued to run another 20 miles. And so it's possible to do amazing things even at when you get to the age of 60. So as Anastasia says, we teach a large number of courses at Stanford, and some of these courses are listed here, and those are for Stanford students, but there's a couple of courses I teach that are open to anybody through the Stanford Continuing Studies program, and we're looking to teach a longevity course in the fall that's open to anybody. Anyone could put no prereqs, no SAT scores to get in for those. But as a result of these courses we teach, we have actually lots and lots of papers on the Stanford website, on Professor Snyder's website, probably about 80 papers from all of our students on various topics. And so those of you who are interested in aging, these are very short, accessible papers, they're like 5 pages or so. And there's some topics here that look interesting. There's one that I quite like is bladder aging. How does the bladder age? And the purpose of this conference, instead of being a pure academic scientific conference, is put the emphasis not just on longevity science, but also application. So what does application mean? Can you actually act on what we're hearing from some of the speakers? And actually, can you actually live longer and better? We talk about that living longer, which is lifespan, living better, which is health span. And then can we actually translate? It's not much use if it's just sitting in the lab in a drawer, or even in a talk here. how can it actually get into the hands of people around the world to actually live longer? Can we actually get a generational impact of another 20 years in our generation, in the next generation? Usually it's like 1 or 2 years of being the impact in the last. In fact, we're going down. The average age of death for American males is 76. It used to be 78. Now it's 76. So I only actually have 16 years left to live. Mike's only got 8 years left to live. I'm not sure about Tony. That's why we're here. We're trying to fix it. Yeah, by the time we're finished, we need to get to 100. So this is the oldest person ever, Jean Coleman, lived to 122 years. And there've been some correlations to that in some parts of the science. If you look at telomeres, which is these things at the ends of your chromosomes that get smaller and smaller and smaller as you get older, it turns out that if you actually triangulate it, they get to 0 at 122 as the longest thing. But you can actually make them longer. Something called telomerase. So it doesn't look too bad. This is the oldest living person right now. I have to actually update this every time I give a presentation because it used to be someone who was at 117, but that person died. So now the oldest living person is only 115. She was actually born in San Francisco. So those of us come from the Bay Area. She lives in Spain, but born in San Francisco. And that's the current oldest living person. And actually the Twitter feed says, what was it? I am old, very old, but not an idiot. And so so she's seems to be quite a character, but she doesn't take interviews anymore. So as we know, there's dynamic shifts. This is the typical pyramidal structure of the population in the world for most countries in this area, where there's more old people than young people. And what's going to happen is that this is going to change. There's a demographic shift, and you're kind of beginning to see it. In France, they're trying to increase the retirement age. If you see it in various countries like Japan, they're probably like 25, 30 years ahead of us, where there physically aren't enough young people to do the work. People are giving away their businesses because there's no one actually to take over their farm. So they're here, you can have my farm for 0. And so we're going to have some dynamics on the social side as well as on the science side that we are making progress on getting older. And this is not the case hitherto. Stone Age man had different age levels, not because they weren't able to get older, but it was just much, much riskier to live even 100 years ago than today. We have electricity, we have sewage systems, we have antibiotics, we have food, and the question is, are these like the low-hanging fruit? Have we just knocked off the easy stuff? Can we actually get further along with more advanced, or actually, is there more easy stuff to do? And certainly, unfortunately, in a lot of countries around the world, there is still a lot of easy stuff yet to do. In India, they've just got toilets for 60% of the population, and that doesn't sound very good. But 10 years ago, it was 20% of the population. So just some basics are still yet to be done around the world. And so you see covers like this. Actually, these covers are quite old at this point. The younger generation, they might actually be able to live to a very, very long age if we can actually translate some of these things. And so different organs age differently. Some of us are heart agers, some of us are lung agers, some of us are kidney agers. And it turns out that if one organ ages at an accelerated pace, it might accelerate the ages of other organs, but so that we're an independent system, and they can affect each other. There's 5 organs or so that are essential to living that we can't do without. You can get wrinkles on your skin, you can have start to have aches in your body, but we can't really do without our brain. We need our heart. We need at least one kidney. And so we need to keep these things alive. So the brain stuff is pretty interesting. So that would be we'll hear from some experts there. And so we have this concept of aging in place. Can we just keep the same age that we are at now? And the chronological age concept is just the number of days you've been here on the planet. Biological age is it a different age to your chronological age? And you can measure. There's a large number of metrics you can measure. There's probably about 60 aging clocks out there to measure the biological age. And it of course, becomes sort of a circular argument. As people start behaving themselves, then the clocks need to be updated to actually get a real biological clock. And genetics, the school of thought was, the old school of thought. I mean, genetics changed a lot in the last 30 years. You see these articles about, well, I need to find the gene for this disease or that disease, or the gene for God, or the gene for gender preference, etc., etc. I think these days we know that most things uses a long tail of genes. And in aging, people used to think, well, my grandparents lived a long time, so I'm fine. I was lucky enough to be born with good genes, and people would think it was 80% was of a genetic factor. But these days, it's only really, the current thinking is sort of 16 to 30%, 5 to 30%, maybe 20, 16, that kind of range. So just because you had good parents or bad parents age-wise doesn't mean that's going to transfer to you. And what's happening here is causation and correlation. If I get time, I'll comment on that. But what's being transferred is, you might chat to someone and say, well, no, my parents lived till 101. One was 101, one was 102. Oh, okay, tell me about your parents. Well, no, they were vegetarians and they were Buddhists, and they lived in a small house with a yard. Okay, tell me about you. Are you a vegetarian? Yeah, because I was brought up that way. Are you Buddhist? No, I'm not Buddhist anymore, but I still meditate. So what's being transferred is not the genetics, it's the lifestyle, right? You can have a debate about, is the lifestyle related to the genetics, but it's certainly the lifestyle is being transferred from generation to generation. So it's very difficult to separate, and this is the confounding factor. So as you listen to these talks, think about what could be confounding, and think about what is actually practical to do. Because in biology, unfortunately, we can't often do an experiment with 1 million people, particularly if it's experimental. So what causes aging? The number one cause of death is cardiovascular disease, but we have other diseases that are related to aging. There's a couple of concepts in aging. One is the hallmarks of aging, which some aspects you may have heard about. That as we get older, there's more chance of type 2 diabetes. As you get older, there's more chance of stem cell exhaustion. So when you have an injury, as you get older, it seems to take a lot longer. If you have a child that falls over, their scar just goes away just like that. There's 9 of these hallmarks that people talk about, the telomeres that we talked about earlier. And so the question is, can we fix each of these diseases one at a time? Or can we find something that fixes them all at once? And I think we'll hear talks today that have both of these strategies that fixes aging in one time. And then one theory is, if you fix one of these hallmarks, maybe they fix all the other hallmarks too. The other theory, no, they're independent. The body's too complex. It's very unlikely to get one thing to fix everything all at once. So let's just stop here for a second and do a test on how long. The number one predictor for mortality was this test that was done about probably about 30 years ago. I think it was about 3,000 people, in the United Kingdom. And there's all kinds of tests. You can see how old you really are. And there's grip strength, reaction timing. But this one seemed to be the most predictable. So what you have to do is stand up. So we'll stand up, and we'll see who lasts the longest. And what you have to do, you have to stand up and stand on one foot. Yes. No, I was going to say that. Yeah, exactly. It's very important. No, it's very important. You got to stand. So no cheating, first of all. So some people, it's not just lifting your foot 1 inch. It's lifting your foot high up like that, and you have to do it with your eyes closed. If you do it with your eyes open, you can do it for hours and hours. But if it's eyes closed, I think me and Mike did it yesterday. I think we lasted about 5 seconds. But so it seems the longest. So okay, eyes closed, and then you can. Yeah. Yes, get started. Yes. See who lasts the longest. Okay, and you sit down if you have to. If you fell over. Let's see. Sounds like people who are doing yoga are getting a bit low. I think. Yeah, it's the hoppers are cheating, maybe. Okay. Well, I think the people who are left, they're on the younger side. They're on the younger side. I think Aaron, I see he's on the younger side. So what is aging? And well, we're going to hear the solutions the rest of the day. So aging, this is no I give to my students, and it's not all negative. We've got wisdom right at the beginning, humor, experience, but we also have the negatives as well. And so let's see. So what causes aging? There we go. Yes. All right. Yeah. Right. And we'll hear about this. About maybe we can remove the old cells, and maybe we can remove get you see experiments like this. But unfortunately, we're not mice. You can remove cells and they run faster. But really, how do you actually get startups? What's the life science journey? And the problem is, healthcare is different to other tech companies. It's ill-defined. We don't know what the outcome is, and we've got different payment systems that are in place. And so the dirty secret of life science is only 5%, if it's not done on humans at the mouse level, get to the end. And in Alzheimer's is 0%, right? Hopefully we can change that. High risk. And so how do we actually get things out there? And there's really 4 or 5 dynamics. One is, what is the probability of success? How long will it take to get there? How easy is it to understand? And if it works, is there a big market? Can we charge a high price for it? Can we have a high probability? So in other words, often you have this placebo where the placebo is actually better than the drug, right? And you want that not to be the case. If you can develop it in less time, that's better. So if it's something that's already developed, a repurposed drug, so a drug that already exists, you can accelerate the safety trials. And if you can use less money to develop it, it's better. And if you can understand it, one of the things is that we want to actually explain the concepts. If it's only your colleague postdoc in your own lab, unless he's rich, you're not going to get financing very easily, right? So can you actually explain with analogies and stories? So hopefully, today we'll have some stories today so people can understand what's going on. And then comparing with other investments, other technology and companies in the same area. And this is, I quite like I like this chart from RA Capital. So they have this as a formula, you just multiply it out. If it's a bigger market, it's better, it's more probability, you divide that by the time and less money, and then how understandable it is you multiply it. So let's see, how much time have I got, Autumn? Okay, perfect. Now, so let's go to this thing about, and I'll leave room for a few questions as well, is that in life sciences, we're constantly finding, we think of a concept and then the whole concept's overturned. So we had this in Alzheimer's last year, where people were looking at plaques and $40 billion looking at plaques, and tens of thousands of scientists looking at plaques as the solution for Alzheimer's. And then somebody said, hang on a minute, and the original research on that didn't actually work out, and let's relook at that. And I'd like to think about the signals where you didn't actually need to know anything about brain research. There was actually signals during that process in the last 25 years that could give you pause for thought. And so this is where I think about causation versus correlation. There's something I quite like. I'm not sure if we've got any epidemiologists here, called the Bradford Hill criteria. At this point, it's about 60 years old, but I still think it's quite useful. People still use it in a revamp. It's a very simple way. He tried to prove smoking caused cancer, which in 1962 was actually quite difficult to do. They didn't have any DNA, they didn't have any computers. And so he had a concept that causation is not the same as correlation. It is, if a chaplain visits you and you die, is it the chaplain caused your death? No, it's just a correlation. And you see charts of correlating. This is the Internet Explorer for those who remember it, correlated murder rate and the number of letters in the spelling bee. There's more serious autism against organic food cells. You say, look at this, oh, I need to stop eating organic food. And so he said, look, it's not as simple as that. It has a 10-point checklist. He said, well, okay, if you smoke more, then you get more lung cancer. People in India, people in New York, people in Britain, they all get lung cancer when they smoke. If you get the cancer after you smoke, right? The more, and so you have to go through this list. And so at the end of it, you still might be wrong, but I've seen many experiments, many articles who just show one chart and expect you to just jump and say that works. So I'll stop there and open up for one or two. We haven't got time for one or two questions. Great. Any questions or comments? Yes, Melissa. Has
there been any research done on giving the mice whatever you're going to do and then have it? Oh, is it on? Hello. So you have one mouse alone, and you give all whatever you want to give to them to make them live longer, and then you have a mouse in a community where in theory they're happier, because that's what seems to be. Yes. These older people that live longer are living in a community and they're happier. And so is it this happiness quotient that really extends it at the end?
So I think intuitively it just worked. There have been quite a few of those experiments. Calhoun actually did a little community experiment where actually the mice had everything, to the unlimited food, unlimited everything. It actually didn't turn out that well, actually, because they started being too lazy in a way. But this is one thing. Mice are different, and actually one of our students sort of highlighted this. They're in a cage, and we proved that we can increase the lifespan of a mouse, by 100% or whatever. But they're in a cage. It's a controlled environment. Like I said, I ran a marathon on Saturday, fell over at mile 6, right? And so you go across the road, fall off your bike, get run over. These mice experiments, they don't have those dynamics usually, right? And so when you see these experiments, they're in a very controlled cage experiment. That's a slightly different take on your question.
But I just wonder if it's happiness in society at the end that takes you the extra 10 years.
Well, I think it is social. Definitely is one of the aspects. I don't think we have Laura Cousins in here. I think she's done some work on that. Oh, she is here. Yes, there we go. Yes, you've done some work on that. So the social is important, and thinking young, being young. In that area. Great.
Thanks. I think it's actually not thinking young so much as thinking old, but it's being content with being old. So we do see positive emotional states increase with age. Longitudinally, cross-sectionally, we see that pretty reliably. And happiness is correlated with life expectancy, but it's not that strongly correlated. So it doesn't look like it's just happiness alone, but but whatever's happening and socially, as Ronjon is saying, looks like it includes some positive emotional states, which is good for health.
I know Professor Carstenson's deliberate use of the word correlated versus causation, because still could be caused, but we probably don't know enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Taking vitamins, and then you're miserable. You don't
exactly.
get an extra 1 year. But
well, that's how I justify my chocolate cake, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
sort of
exactly.
like it's sort of like you can behave yourself and have no sugar and know this and know that, but then if you're miserable, that probably is not good for longevity. So you can, it's a balance, and then it's glass half full and outlook in life. I think the people have laughter, the sort of laughter yoga activity. Okay, we're going to run a tight ship. Time is up, and we're on to Professor Snyder.
Oh, I'm not Professor Snyder, but no, applause for Ronjon for sure. Before we pass the reins on to Mike, I wanted to quickly acknowledge our amazing logistics team that was here bright and early at 7 in the morning to kind of get everything set up. So Dawn, if you can raise your hand, I saw you earlier, or she's back there. Nikki and Manoj on the right here, Alexander, Anastasia. And our amazing AV support guy, Nathan. Thank you, applause for amazing folks in the morning. So with that, I'll do a quick intro. As Ronjon mentioned, Dr. Artem